Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a country where the streets aren't just, metaphorically charged with frustration, but literally filled with the smoke of protest, fires fueled by decades of grievances. That powerful image is really at the core of the source material for today's deep dive.
Yeah.
It gives us a stark look at, well, the consequences when leadership fails its people.
Indeed, yeah. Our main source here, it's an in-depth report from DW News, and it paints a really vivid picture of Kenya, especially right now as it grapples with the 35th anniversary of the bloody Sabasaba uprising.
Right.
So we're going to explore what these ongoing events really tell us about these deep-seated issues, police accountability, government responses, and the profound challenges of achieving genuine political change. And a lot of this comes back to leadership, or the lack of it.
Exactly. So our mission today is to cut through the noise, give you the essential insights, the why behind the headlines. We want to give you a shortcut, basically, to understanding this complex situation, focusing specifically on where Kenyan leadership seems to have faltered and the, frankly, devastating impact it's had. Okay, so let's set the scene. Recently, Kenya was rocked by these really intense protests on a Monday. And this timing is significant, isn't it? It coincided with the 35th anniversary of the Sabasaba uprising back in 1990.
Yeah, hugely significant.
For anyone unfamiliar, that was a pivotal moment,
Yeah.
right? When Kenyans first demanded a return to democracy from a one-party state.
Precisely.
And this time, the immediate impact was just devastating. At least 11 people killed across the country, hundreds arrested. Our sources use this phrase, fire in the streets of Nairobi and fire in the hearts of Kenyan protesters. Pretty powerful stuff.
It is. And what's fascinating here, or maybe alarming, is how these recent protests are both an echo of that past, but also a raw expression of very current, very urgent grievances. The call for broad political change is still there, absolutely. But demonstrators are incredibly specific this time.
What are they saying specifically?
They're demanding the cost of living comes down. That's huge. That police are held accountable.
Yeah.
And that young people get jobs, get off the streets. And the fact it happened on July 7th, which everyone knows as Sabasaba, just underscores that deep historical root.
So the streets are alight with protest. How did the authorities respond?
Predictably, perhaps.
Predictably violent. Our sources detail a swift, often violent response. Police use water cannons, tear gas, even whips against demonstrators.
Yeah, the reports of whips are disturbing. 2 officers seen actually whipping people in the back of a truck.
And there were moments where police, after being forced back by projectiles, then fired into the crowd.
Exactly, firing into the crowd.
The emotion from the ground just feels so raw. There's this quote from a protester. Let me find it. They should think about who they are killing. We are not animals, we're human beings like them, and we need to be protected by them, yet they are the ones killing us. Where should we run to for safety? That's just heartbreaking, a cry for basic humanity.
It really is, and that quote perfectly highlights this perception of brutality on the ground. Kenyans keep castigating the police, is the word used, over what they call heavy-handedness. We're talking reports of tear gas lobbed directly into homesteads, water cannons discharging right into people's homes.
Into homes, not just in the streets.
Into homes, yeah. But despite this aggressive crackdown, the sources are really clear on this point. Kenyans have remained adamant that they will remain on the streets until they see the changes that they clamor for come to pass. That resolve, that determination, it really shows the incredible depth of frustration.
But it's not just about individual acts of brutality, is it? The sources point to something more systemic.
Absolutely. Underneath it all, there's this pervasive, entrenched problem of impunity within the police force. It's stated quite bluntly, police in Kenya have been operating with wide impunity for a very long time.
Wow. Wide impunity.
Yeah. And it means there's been barely any accountability for the brutality, for the killings, and for just, in general, the kind of bad behavior that the police have been undergoing for a number of years.
And legally, what recourse do people have?
That's the crux of it. There's very little. Very few policemen have ever been charged in court for the actions that they carry out against citizens. Think about that. Year after year, incident after incident, and almost no consequences.
So it's understandable that people reach a breaking point.
Exactly. The population has basically said that there's nothing else to talk about. They've reached a tipping point in terms of its relationship with the police. And this anger isn't just abstract, it's manifesting physically. Lots and lots of police stations are being torn by Kenyans.
Torn down.
Damaged, attacked, torn apart. It's not just random vandalism. It feels like a symbolic, direct challenge to the institutions that represent that unchecked power. It signals a real groundswell of public anger and public outrage.
Okay, so public anger is at this absolute boiling point. What about the government? What's their strategy? Are we seeing any efforts from the leadership to maybe de-escalate, calm things down, or are they trying to silence dissent?
Well, if we're looking at this through the lens of leadership, the sources suggest there's pretty much zero effort to calm the population coming from the government. If anything, they say the government has gone ahead and even stoked the flames a lot further.
Stoke the flames.
Well, just a few weeks before these protests, the Minister of Interior, Kipchumba, reportedly delivered shoot-to-kill orders
Shoot to kill against protesters.
against any protesters who would show up near a police station. Now, he later tried to retract that statement, can kind of walk it back, but, the damage was done. Videos apparently surfaced showing police officers saying they had been given permission to kill.
That's chilling. It's hard to square that level of aggression with, well, responsible leadership facing dissent. It really paints a picture of a leadership actively making the crisis worse, not better.
That seems to be the impact, yes.
And the sources confirm, right, no efforts to repair the relationship between the police and communities.
None mentioned. The result, as the sources note, is a lot of bloodshed primarily being pushed by the aggression of the police.
So the government's strategy seems to be escalation, not conciliation.
The outcome certainly points that way. It reinforces this perception that the state sees protests not as a call for help, but as the threat to be crushed. And that posture from the top, well, it just enables that cycle of impunity we talked about.
Amidst all this, though, there are still calls for reform. We heard from the former PM and opposition leader.
Right, Raila Odinga.
Yeah, he criticized a rogue police force that shoots people with impunity. And he proposed actual reforms: accountability, transparency, improving police-people relations.
Which sounds positive on the surface. But then you have the perspective of investigative journalist Odanga Madung, also in our sources.
What does he say?
His take is pretty stark. Reform is unlikely to be enough to extinguish this firestorm. And he points to this powerful youth-led movement. It's hard to tell where it's ultimately going. There are efforts, apparently, to call for dialogue with several members of the youth-led political movement.
Dialogue sounds good, but does it work?
Well, history suggests maybe not. These channels, these dialogue attempts, have never really brought about the change that a lot of young people have been looking for.
And here's where it gets really interesting, connecting back to those leadership failures. The sources suggest these past dialogues often end up just creating political cronyism and political tokenism.
Exactly. They never actually address the core issues people are protesting about.
So they become patchwork, basically. Temporary fixes.
Patchwork is a good word for it. They don't deliver the justice people seek. And so we see this painful cycle repeat time and time again.
It really highlights a massive disconnect, doesn't it, between the official mechanisms supposedly for change and what people actually need. It's like dialogue itself becomes a way to delay things rather than solve them.
A tool for managing dissent rather than addressing it.
So what we've really uncovered here, it's not just a story about failed leadership in one instance. It feels more like a chilling blueprint for how political systems can almost weaponize dialogue, turn procedures into mechanisms for delay, for suppression, which just ensures the cycle keeps going. The fundamental problems don't get fixed, accountability remains absent, and the consequences are just devastating.
Yeah, and if you zoom out, connect this to the bigger picture, this recurring cycle in Kenya really highlights a critical challenge for any society, right? What happens when the very channels meant to bring change, meant to resolve conflict, actually end up perpetuating the problems? When dialogue becomes tokenism, not real resolution, it just fundamentally shreds public trust and legitimacy.
Which leaves us, and you, our listener, with a really important question to think about. In situations like this, where the established official ways of doing things consistently fail to deliver justice or progress, and where public anger hits that tipping point, what avenues truly remain for people seeking fundamental change and accountability from their leaders? What's left?